Hey there, good morning everybody. I'm Connie Foote with Foote Title Group, where we protect your home ownership. Welcome to Coffee with Connie, and thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. We're a little bit early today because I have a lot going on today in the schedule, but I really wanted to get to talk to you this morning to try to bring you some information like we try to do a couple times every week. One of the things at Foote Title Group we are very passionate about is making sure that the closing process when you buy or sell your home is as smooth as possible and that you understand all of the steps through the process. And we also want to make sure that you feel very comfortable knowing that your home ownership is protected long after your closing. So we've been talking a lot in the past week about what happens when someone passes away. How do I sell a house? How does that work? What if I'm buying a house that someone owned that passed away? How does that work? How can that person obviously can't sell their house anymore, so what's the situation with that? So let's talk about a couple of things with respect to this. First of all, you have to understand that when the person passes away, the property is then owned by an estate. And so that estate is an entity that doesn't have a person to act for it until the court establishes a personal representative or an executor. And that's typically already set up if the person had a will. Then you just have to go through the court, orphans court, and actually present that will and set up who is going to be that person. And you know, it's a little bit of a process, but it's not too complicated if there was a will. In Maryland, that the estate has to be set up in order for that property to be sold so that that person can be established that can act on behalf of that estate. In Virginia, the estate doesn't have to be set up as long as there was a will. The will directs that, and so we would need a copy of that will, and we'd have to determine that all of the heirs that are listed in the will are represented and taken care of. But the other thing to understand is, first, before you even get to that part, what we have to understand is who actually owns that property before that person passed away. So when that person passed away, if it was your mom and your mom and dad owned it together, and they owned it as what's called tenants by the entirety, which is a ownership that is specifically reserved for married individuals, then your dad would automatically own it completely, 100%. It automatically goes to him. It doesn't have to go through an estate process. And so then he doesn't have to deal with any of those issues. If your mom wasn't married and she owned it with one of her children or a sibling or someone else, then we would look at how did she actually own that piece of property with that other person? Did she own it as tenants in common, or did she own it as joint tenants? So joint tenants means similar to married couple. If two people or more own a piece of property together, all of them own 100% of that property. So if something happens to one person, the surviving people would own it completely without anyone else having an ownership interest in it. If she owned it with others as tenants in common, each person owns a divided interest in that property. So whatever that percentage is that was determined when they took that ownership, that's the ownership that the surviving people would own that property with her, but her interest now would go into her estate. So anyone that has an ownership interest in that estate would actually have an ownership interest with the surviving people. Hey there, Jeff, how are you this morning? Good morning, Miss Carla. How are you? Been a while since I got to see you. Hey, Darlene. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys tuning in, but also checking in and say hi. So let me know if you're on. Let me know where you're coming from. I really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for tuning in. Good morning there, Mr. Jeff. So if your mom owned it with other individuals and they owned it as tenants in common, that, like I said, that everybody owns a divided interest, and so something happened to your mom and she passed, her interest goes into her estate with then anyone who had an interest in her estate would then own it with those surviving owners. So let's say she owned it with her best friend from college, they owned it as tenants in common, and your mom passed, and so the roommate from college still owns her percentage. Maybe it was 50-50. So she owns 50%, but then your mom's interest is now owned by anyone who has an ownership in her estate. So maybe it's you and a brother who are her surviving heirs, and you two would have the ownership interest. Now, it doesn't happen automatically. That situation has to go through an estate process. So if that property is to be sold, your mom's heirs would have to be established through the estate process, so the estate could act on your mom's behalf, because now in Maryland, the estate owns that property, and so the estate has to be established, and a person to represent that estate has to be established. And so when the closing happens, when those individuals sell that property, whoever is established to act on behalf of that estate would sign the documents with your mom's college roommate, because now that's who the owners are, the estate and the college roommate. So it depends on how the ownership was established. One thing I will recommend to you is, things happen to people all the time that are very unexpected, which makes it a little bit difficult to try to plan things in our life. But this is one of those things that you can plan. You can actually make plans about how those things are going to happen if something was to happen to someone, because it may not be an illness that happens over a long period of time where you have time to plan. It may be something very sudden that happens later this afternoon that you weren't prepared for. So have a conversation, whether it's with your attorney, whether it's with a title company like Foote Title Group. We can actually help you record a deed that makes sure that the ownership is addressed like your mom wants it to be done. And that way, if something was to happen to her, then her wishes are taken care of, so she feels comfortable knowing that she doesn't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. And then you also understand that you don't have to worry about it if you need to sell it, if you need to refinance it to get some cash out, if you need to do a second mortgage, so you can understand what your ramifications are and what your options are that are available to you. So, as I try to do all the time, provide you with some good information that hopefully makes you have a question and say, I was thinking about that, or maybe I wasn't thinking about that, and wow, that's a really great idea. Let's go ahead and do something about that. And that's what my goal is. I've been doing closings for over 30 years. We've experienced all different types of things, so we have lots of different resources to pull from if we don't have the exact answer for you. And we also have a lot of resources that we like to help you with to understand a lot of these processes. So if you go to our website, www.footetitlegroup.com, and you click on either, whether you're a buyer or a seller or a realtor or a lender, click on that tab. And then there's a drop down that says resources. There's all kinds of information on a lot of these things we talk about that can help you maybe weed through some of those questions. Or you can reach out to any of our team members in Maryland or Virginia, and they can direct you on the right path on how to take care of these questions for you. So hopefully I helped you with a little bit of information today. Hope you guys have a super fantastic Thursday. Hey, Phil, how are you today? Hey, Helen, thanks for tuning in. And if you found what we talked about valuable, please, please, please click the share button. Sharing is caring, and that means you're helping someone else understand something that maybe you got some good information on today. So hope you guys have a super fantastic Thursday. I look forward to talking to you again real soon. I'm Connie Foote with Foote Title Group. Thank you for tuning in to Coffee with Connie. We protect your home ownership, and I look forward to helping you soon. Have a great day.